After what was mostly a miserable decade, the Los Angeles Lakers are back on top of the NBA. The franchise won its first championship in 10 years, and the period in between this decade was one of the darkest and roughest in the iconic team's history. However, the characteristic drama that usually accompanies the Lakers was mostly absent this season, and it helped the team remain focused on the final prize, which they ended up winning even through one of the most difficult seasons for Lakers fans and in league history. Join us now as we discuss how the Los Angeles Lakers re-established themselves as the most dominant NBA franchise ever. The Lakers started the 2010s decade in dominant fashion, just like they finished it. Behind the duo of Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol, the Lakers won their second straight NBA championship in 2010. There was much speculation on whether head coach Phil Jackson would return for the 2010-2011 NBA season, but he did. However, the back-to-back defending champions were swept in the second round by the eventual champions, the Dallas Mavericks, next season, and Jackson was dismissed. Things were clearly starting to change, as before the start of the lockout-shortened 2011-2012 season, star forward Lamar Odom requested to be traded, prompting the team to send him to the Mavericks. The Lakers also hired Mike Brown, who coached LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers to the 2007 NBA Finals. Before the 2012 trade deadline, the Lakers also traded longtime guard Derek Fisher and still managed to finish as the third seed, but they lost in the second round to the OKC Thunder. After a couple of lackluster seasons, everything appeared to get better when the Lakers acquired Steve Nash in the summer of 2012. Just 1 week later, the Lakers also added Dwight Howard via trade. Mike Brown was fired after a 1-4 start to the season, after which the Lakers hired Mike D'Antoni. Expectations were really high for this star-studded team, but those were never realized. Kobe Bryant suffered a torn Achilles that cost him the last games of the season. The Lakers finished with a 45-37 record and were swept in the first round by the San Antonio Spurs. During the 2013-2014 season, just a week after Kobe returned from his Achilles injury, he suffered a broken bone in his knee and missed the remainder of the season. This was just the start of the awful luck that would haunt them over the next 5 years, as Pau Gasol, their only other star player left, had an injury-filled, inconsistent season that ended with a 27-55 record. The Lakers missed the playoffs for the first time since 2005, and D'Antoni resigned from his head coaching position. Gasol left the team in free agency. In the very first game of the 2014-2015 season, Julius Randle, the Lakers' first-round pick from that year, went down with a broken leg that ended his rookie campaign, and Kobe only managed to play 35 games that season before tearing a rotator cuff in his shoulder. This all once again led to disaster, as the team finished the season 21-61. Next year wouldn't get any better, even when they drafted D'Angelo Russell with the second overall pick, as Kobe Bryant announced he would retire at the end of the season, and the Lakers finished 17-65, the worst record in franchise history. There was a huge overhaul next season, not only with the players but around the organization. In an attempt to right the ship, the Lakers hired Golden State Warriors assistant Luke Walton as their new head coach. They fired general manager Mitch Kupchak and replaced him with Rob Pelinka, and they brought in Magic Johnson as the president of basketball operations. Team governor Jeannie Buss also announced the removal of her brother Jim Buss as executive vice president of basketball operations. They drafted Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball with back-to-back number 2 overall picks in 2016 and 2017, as well as Kyle Kuzma with the 27th pick in 2017. This was also the year when the Lakers traded away D'Angelo Russell after he caused a drama-filled scandal between teammate Nick Young and his fiancée Iggy Azalea. Even with this influx of young talent and new leadership, the Lakers finished 26-56 in 2017 and 37-45 in 2018. It was clear they needed an established free agent signing to turn the tables in LA. This capped off one of the toughest and darkest periods for Lakers fans. Now, let's take a look at how things took a turn for good with the arrival of LeBron James. But before we do, we want to thank you for watching today's video. And if you're enjoying it thus far, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing NBA content. On July 2018, the Lakers signed LeBron James to a 4-year, $154 million contract. James's arrival immediately helped the young Lakers start winning more games, but the team still had some issues. James missed a key portion of the season after injuring his groin during their Christmas game. Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram also ended their seasons early thanks to injuries, and the characteristic Hollywood drama was again part of their season. GM Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson had some backstage issues going on, which culminated in Johnson stepping down as president of basketball operations in the middle of a media availability conference. Nobody had any idea Johnson was about to do what he did. The team also fired Coach Walton at the end of the season. James knew if things were to work out in LA, he'd have to be the architect of rebuilding the Laker culture back up. Some of their young players' immaturity and lack of commitment was a big negative at times, as was the whole Pelinka Magic saga. LeVar Ball's antics and comments regarding the Lakers didn't help either, and it's safe to say LeBron James was not a fan of him. After months of speculation and back-and-forth talks, the Lakers were finally able to complete a trade that brought Anthony Davis to town. At the time, many questioned whether the Lakers had given up too much. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, the 4th overall pick in the 2019 draft, and 2 extra first-rounders. This was the first step in the Lakers' return to their winning ways. They gave up much of their youth in exchange of a superstar of Davis's caliber, so now they had to surround the team with fitting pieces. The Lakers made a questionable move by bringing in Rajon Rondo in 2018, given they already had LeBron and Lonzo, 2 top playmakers, and what those 2 actually needed were solid shooters. And in 2019, they did just that, bringing in the likes of Danny Green and Avery Bradley, and re-signing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The former 2 not only brought outside shooting, but also some much-needed perimeter defense. The Rajon Rondo-Anthony Davis combo had been a very successful duo just 2 seasons prior in New Orleans, so keeping Rondo, who would ironically become an instrumental part to their road to the NBA title, was a good idea. Davis has long been very vocal about his desire to play exclusively as a power forward, not as a center. Word has it, AD prefers to avoid the constant banging and dirty work centers are often asked to do, and would rather focus on posting up, scoring off assists, and anchoring the defense inside the paint. The Lakers also made sure to grant his desires by signing both Dwight Howard and former teammate DeMarcus Cousins. Sadly, as we all know, Cousins tore his ACL during preseason workouts and didn't play a single game for them. And at that time, signing Howard sounded like a huge gamble, even if they were only paying him the veteran's minimum. The Lakers smartly surrounded their top stars with players whose games complemented theirs to perfection, unlike they did last year. But that's not what they deserve the most credit for. Instead, we should be wondering at how they managed to go a full season without any major side drama. Players like Dwight Howard and Rajon Rondo have long had a history of not always meshing well with teammates and saying the wrong things to the media. Whether that would be because of their egos or for basketball reasons, people could only wonder how those 2 would coexist with LeBron James in their planned title run. And as if that wasn't enough, the Lakers also added J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters, 2 other mega-strong personalities, before this season's trade deadline. But the results were actually the total opposite. The Lakers had no major side storylines that created distractions from their end goal, winning a championship. Perhaps Kobe Bryant's tragic death brought them all together. Maybe this year's unlikely season stoppage helped change their perspective. Or was the NBA's fight against social issues and racial inequalities that brought the whole league together? It could have been a combination of all of them. The Lakers were their own biggest enemy when it came to chemistry, as only they and their egos could stop them from putting on performances as dominant as we saw. Hollywood had no drama, for once. Surround the most talented duo in the league with capable role players that could all remain focused for one full season, and you've got a winning team. The Clippers got in their own way. The Bucks couldn't perform when it mattered most. Young teams like the Utah Jazz and Denver Nuggets were in fights of their lives this postseason. But ultimately, it's very tough to beat talent when it's accompanied by discipline. Props to LeBron James, arguably the greatest player ever, for continuing to be a leader on and off the court. Props to Anthony Davis, who is an alpha male that never let his ego get in the way of the bigger picture. Props to the Lakers management for changing the course of their franchise. Because today, the Lakers have officially re-established themselves as the most dominant franchise in the league. And after winning a record-tying 17th championship, with a very good chance to repeat next season if this roster returns nearly intact, they might have cemented themselves as the most dominant NBA franchise of all time. Can the Lakers repeat as champions next season? Are they the top NBA franchise of all time? Let us know in the comments down below, and as always, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel.